I'm Laura Blumenthal, and this is the Berkshire Heroes podcast. And I'm joined today by Amy Garstang from Wokingham United Charities. Welcome, Amy.
Hi Laura, how you doing?
Good, thank you. And you have been the head of Wokingham United Charities for about 5 years now. And in a past life, you were a police officer in Bracknell for 8 years. I'm definitely going to be asking you about that. But first of all, I feel as if Wokingham United Charities is one of the best kept secrets. So can you tell us a bit about the charity and who it seeks to help?
Of course, so Wokingham United Charities has been in existence since 1451, so 600 years worth of history. The charity primarily supports people facing financial hardship. So we have two elements. One is our amazing West End almshouses, where we've got 27 flats for older people in need of accommodation. And then we have our grant funding side. So within that, there's a variety of support available from essential items to organisational grants. So we hope we cover a whole host of needs across the borough.
And you've clearly been attracted to roles which help people, if it's in the police force or in the charity world. Why do you think this is?
I think just doing something that has a positive impact. The police was attractive as a job because the shift work fitted in with family life back in the day, but it also gave a unique opportunity to experience life and how other people go through things. I think the opportunities that come with being a police officer, sights you don't see every day, and hopefully playing to my strengths in those situations had a positive impact.
And coming back to the charity, which issues are you seeing right now? What are people really struggling with?
I think it's just the general demands of day-to-day life. We've obviously come through the pandemic with COVID and then straight into a cost of living crisis. And each one of those we thought would end, and it hasn't really. It's kind of dragged on, and it's now the new normal. I think people are just grappling with that in terms of how they deal with day-to-day finances. It's all very well managing your money, but if you physically haven't got enough of it, what do you do? And it's not just people who are in receipt of benefits. We're talking about people who are working full time, just about managing. And then if something goes wrong, like their car breaks down, it's how they deal with that and what support available to support them.
And which initiatives do you think's helping them, or is there any support you've seen which has really been helpful?
I think there's a whole host of initiatives across the borough in terms of direct financial assistance, but it's things as well like the preventative and engaging support that what draws people in is, say, for example, our essential item. It'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So their washing machine packs up. They come to us, they need a washing machine. But normally there's other issues behind the scenes in terms of debt or benefit claims that are taking weeks and months to be resolved. So it's making sure that we're providing holistic support across the borough in terms of the organisations that come together to support those individuals.
And the household support fund, because I know you're very much involved in helping give that to people who are in need of it. I know that it's been extended and it was introduced during COVID. But are you worried that when the household support fund ends at some point, what support are people going to get? How are they going to be helped?
Absolutely. People have become to rely on that. I mean, it was an emergency support back in COVID, and it's just been continued and continued. And when it's been continued for so long, it's no longer emergency support. It's not crisis support. It's day-to-day living support. And when that stops, what's going to be replaced? Because people's financial circumstances won't have improved so much that they don't need that element of support. And I think through the work that we're doing with the Hardship Alliance, it's about the preventative and holistic support and the medium to long term that we can support those clients with. So it's not a sticking plaster of here's a voucher that will see you through for a few weeks. We want to put things in place that will support them longer term and hopefully eventually help them out of the circumstances that they're in.
And I still feel as if prices are so high, but are you seeing any cost of living issues subsiding? Do you think things are getting better in any way for people you help?
I think it's just the new normal. It's a new stabilisation of finances now. I don't think we'll ever go back to kind of pre-cost of living. Um, it is a significant concern because people, say pensioners, for example, they may have planned for their retirement, but they haven't planned for this, and they have very limited opportunity to increase their income. So when they're working with what they've got, we've had an increase, I think, of pensioners coming to us saying, my bed of 20 years is broken and I cannot afford to replace it. And these are potentially people who are asset rich, cash poor, but just don't have the means available to go and buy a new bed. And I think that just speaks volumes for where people are at the moment.
And is that a demographic you're seeing more of, more older people coming to you for support?
Yeah, begrudgingly so, I think. They're one of the cohorts who don't like to reach out for support, but it's genuinely needed. So when you can access that and say, we can help you, that's really empowering because you know you're reaching the right people then. And with the cuts to the winter fuel allowance, for example, they're this kind of a hidden cohort who don't necessarily put their hand up and say, I'm struggling.
Yeah, when I talk to older people, they never want to be a burden.
Absolutely.
They think it's all on them to get over things. Some of them are the wartime generation, that just get on with it generation. So that is a real struggle. And I was looking at inflation rates, and although we always talk about the it's over 2% now, if you look over the last 2 years plus, prices overall have gone up by 20%, which is huge if you put
Yeah.
it into that perspective.
Yeah.
And are you seeing any new problems, or is there anything on the horizon that you see coming down that you think is going to be a real serious issue?
I think for me, it's the demand on the voluntary sector because when statutory services can't provide the support available and the increase in amount of people who are requiring sort of intermediate response, there's a demand on capacity and resources and ultimately finances across the voluntary sector to support that demand. And there will be a ceiling. And none of us in the voluntary sector want to say we can't help, but we've got limited means in terms of what we can do with what we've got. Um, so I think it's just making sure that how we support people is sustainable and it's making the greatest impact for their circumstances and for what we can offer.
I mean, I'm quite worried about people of my generation and people in their 40s who locally can't afford to buy a house, so they rent. And what's going to happen if they can't get on that housing ladder? What happens when they're retired?
Absolutely.
And older people at the moment, they're not all homeowners, but a huge proportion are. So they've got that security. And I'm just really worried that when you do get in a few decades' time, everyone retiring who's in that boat of rental, what's going to happen to them when they can't pay their rent anymore, or
Yeah.
they've got other issues and they can't relax in their own home? Is that something you're concerned about?
Yeah, I think again, generally, generationally, absolutely. I don't. I think we're having a shift from home ownership because it is so potentially unachievable to so many, but it's the security and the stability of having somewhere that you can call home and not worry about not being able to afford it. And I think you're completely right. As we get to retirement, we're going to have so many more people not being able to afford their rent. I would say this is where almshouses come in because it's the perfect solution to that. But again, we just don't have enough to support potentially the increased numbers of people that will find themselves in circumstances in their late 60s, 70s saying, I can't afford to pay my rent. Where do I go now? And we have seen it at the almshouses, the amount of people who apply to us who are in their 70s, potentially 80s, living in their car because they can't afford somewhere to rent, or they are on the housing list with the council, but they're being offered a bed in shared accommodation with people far young. It's just not suitable for their well-being. So I don't know what the answer is. I'd love to say almshouses because it would fit the bill, but I just don't think that it's going to come to fruition quickly enough.
And explain to us, for those who don't know about almshouses, what are they? Who are they for? And how can people get their name down for them?
So almshouses are low cost accommodation for people financially in need. Each almshouse would have a variety of criteria. So ours in Wokingham is that you need to have connections to Wokingham Borough. You need to be of retirement age and be in financial need. Other almshouses have other criteria. Some don't have an age restriction at all. So some are particular for veterans, for example, or nurses. So there's a whole host across the country. I think they're a hidden secret because they do so much and they offer so much more. When you are a resident at an almshouse, you're a beneficiary of the charity. So it's very different to private landlords, tenants, etc. But what you also get with an almshouse is a community. It's that community ethos. It reduces isolation and loneliness. And the support that you get from just living at an almshouse, there's been studies done about increasing life. They live longer, their well-being is improved. So it's a hidden secret of answers, I think, but something the Almshouse Association will be able to provide far more information on than myself.
And so if someone finds themselves in a Woking United Charity almshouse, is that their home permanently then, or is it temporary?
No, it's permanent. They can be there as long as they are capable of independent living. That's another one of our criteria. They are welcome to stay for as long as they fit the eligibility. So if they were to win the lottery, for example, we would probably say, you're not in financial hardship anymore. Let's look at kind of move on options. Or if, for example, the accommodation is no longer meeting their needs in terms of health or disabilities. But yeah, I mean, we've had residents who've been there 20 years or so.
And moving on to your time with the police in Bracknell, do you have a really memorable moment that you look back on, either something you're proud of or something that crops up on your mind from time to time?
There's just so many. I mean, it is the best job in the world being a police officer for so many reasons. But I think for me, it's incredibly privileged being involved in someone's life at potentially their most vulnerable moment and doing what you can to support them through that. That's what I took away from being in the police, and I hope that whoever I came across in that job role, I don't want them to remember anything, but if they can remember how I made them feel safe and secure at any point in that process, that's enough for me. There's obviously the hilarious moments of herding horses on the A329 and the camaraderie between colleagues. The seriousness of the job is just surmounted by the good times and the great times that you have with your colleagues, and that's kind of what gets you through, because you never know what you're going to rock up to when you go to a job.
Is there something you're particularly proud of?
I think there's a number of jobs that I still remember vividly to this day, and one victim of a sexual assault in particular, walking her through from the initial report to the court case, and seeing the highs and lows and going through that with her was probably, I say a highlight, and I don't mean that in terms of a great memory, but for me that was a true achievement. The outcome wasn't what we had hoped for at court, but being with her and her feedback at the end of that, that's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of, because that just sums up my time as a police officer.
I spent some time shadowing the police in Reading, the Thames Valley Police, but also the Metropolitan Police in London. And what I was really struck by was the police officers' empathy and kindness, and how they can go from 1 minute being extremely authoritative and they're the boss and you're going to listen to them, to suddenly the kindest people, to a woman who's just gone through a domestic violence attack,
Absolutely.
or a young girl who's suicidal at Reading train station. And I was so impressed by that, because they're quite rare strengths to have in just in one person, to have the strength to suddenly take control of a situation that might be a crisis, but also be incredibly empathetic and kind to get people in crisis on your side. Do
Yeah.
you feel as if that time in the police has really got you ready to for the role that you've got at the moment, because you're a boss, but also you've got all these people who are in crisis coming to you, and you have to be able to have that emotional intelligence for them to trust you and open up?
Yeah, you in the police, you need to be quick to build rapport and get that relationship going. And I think if you can arrest someone for whatever offence, go through that process with them, and then have them say thank you at the end of it, even being charged and sending them to court, if they can say thank you at the end of it, you've done a good job. And I think that just goes to show that that engagement that police have with people is just incredible. And they are a certain type of person. Like, I was only there for 8 years. People that are there a lot longer, it's just phenomenal. But yeah, I think so. And especially now, dealing with it's from the other side, I think. I'd walk into situations that I'm reading about on grant applications, and there's only so much you could do as a police officer. Send a referral off. You're there for that immediate moment. Whereas now I get to provide kind of the comfort blanket. And if we can't do it ourselves, I've got more time now to find who can and support those clients through the circumstances they're finding themselves in.
And what are you focusing on right now? And how can people find Wokingham United Charities online if they want to?
So it's quite exciting. So we've obviously had the COVID pandemic, the cost of living crisis. I've said to a few people now, I think the last year or so has been the first business as usual year for quite some time. So it's an opportunity for us to reflect on the reactiveness of what we've done over the past few years, and also plan our future. As I said right at the beginning, the charity's been in existence for 600 years. We want the charity to still be here in another 600 years. It's about how we find the best way to do that in terms of supporting the people who need help now, but also planning for the future. So we're looking at our strategy, how we can be sustainable, looking at routes for collaboration, and just making sure that we're responding to the needs the best way that we can. And in terms of how to find us, we're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, we have our website, but we're also sponsors of Wokingham Today's, the charity and community pages. So yeah, we're in the paper quite a bit, championing other charities. So yeah, there's roots in.
And finally, if you were Prime Minister, which law would you introduce or change, and why?
So I thought about this. I think one idea would be for everybody to spend some time being a police officer, because I think it would give a different perspective. And until you've walked in the police's shoes, you haven't seen the world the way that they do. But to balance that on a lighter note, I think some sort of quirky compulsory initiatives, such as having free ice cream on a Friday, or a compliment hour, because life's so serious. Like you said, we only see the negatives and the bad things, but there's so much joy, not only in Wokingham Borough, because it's a fantastic place, but everywhere. And I think people just need to hold on to that. So yeah, compliments, an hour a week, just complimenting people would be great.
I'd definitely vote for that. I think that, if I'm right, most people can apply to Shadow, Thames Valley Police. So I'll see if I can find the online form, and see if I can get it pinned to this podcast and on social media, because I'd really recommend it. I loved it. People are so humorous, they're curious, they're really happy to have you there. It's exciting. You can never predict what's going on. You meet the kookiest people, but also the nicest people.
Absolutely.
And everyone's got a story, and everyone seems to be there because they really wanted to save lives predominantly. And a lot of them seem to come from backgrounds where they had been victims of violence before themselves, or people that they really cared about. So I do think that my time shadowing Thames Valley Police in Reading was something that will stay with me forever. It was so impressive, and I'd recommend everyone to do it because there's a lot of mysteriousness about the police, and you read about things in the press which aren't always fair or accurate. So go and see it with your own eyes. That's always the best
Yeah,
way to do things.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's the best job in the world. It's given me all the tools that I need to get to where I am and support the charity.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for joining me on the Berkshire Heroes podcast. It's been brilliant to chat to you.
Thanks, Laura.